Oh, aloha mai kako. Sorry, aloha. I'm Brent Kakesako. So unfortunately, I'm not from here. I'm from Oahu. Sorry about that. But I'm with a small nonprofit called HACBID, Hawaii Alliance for Community-Based Economic Development. So we'll be helping to kind of walk through and be the steward, I guess, of this conversation. Can you go to the next slide? So first, yeah, as Baron mentioned, thanks for taking your time on this Saturday. This meeting's supposed to end at 12, so we want to be mindful of that. We're really trying to stay focused on the current issues. So this is really tied to, as you can see in the Q&A, sort of the interagency working group and then current access. If we run through the agenda, Dr. Fink will provide an opening from the Department of Health. I'll walk through the goals again, and then Mickey Ala from the Park Service will give a sort of a big picture overview to sort of ground the conversation. And then each of the agency will have time to update you folks. And then we'll take a break. So if you haven't signed in, as mentioned, please do. We'll follow up with a synthesis of what was shared, these slides, and then also there's sheets for Q&A. We know the time for Q&A is not as long as maybe folks would like. So if you could write it down, and then when we take the break, we'll try to sift through so that way we can at least hit as many of these questions tied to the interagency working group and current access.
Excuse me, Brent, can I ask you just a little question on the agenda to get some clarification?
Sure.
Yeah. The agenda had no time on it, just 10 a.m. it starts. We don't know how long it's supposed to go. It's going 2 hours. And Department of Health said that there would be 20 minutes for welcoming and all of that stuff, and then each agency would get 10 minutes to give their spiel. So that would take us till 11:10, leaving the last 50 minutes for question and answers. And that's exactly what was sent to us in writing. Okay. So I just hope we can stick to that so the community has time to get up and ask their questions or whatever, because that's very important.
Sorry. Got it. Yep. So I should have put times. My fault. So definitely we'll have, that's that update section. So yeah, thanks, DeGray. If we can, oh, sorry, Anya.
Hi, Brent. Just for the record, this is not the same agenda that was given to the public.
Oh, okay.
And so there's new things on here, and then I think that you put everything for the agency roles and responsibilities, under there. And then there was other bullets that said that there would be a top story. I think maybe that's what he's referring to. So just for the record, I wanted everybody to know that this is an agenda that did not go out to the public and is modified. And I don't see that top story or time for the community. And I just heard HACBID said that there is probably not enough time for question and answers, which I'm here for. So I just wanted that on the record. Thank you, Laurie Buchanan, and Community Advocate.
Okay, thanks, Auntie Larry. Yep. So given what went out, when we take a break, we can check with the agencies on how they want to handle. But are there any other, I guess, updates or questions with the agenda part? Okay. So thanks, Dr. Fink.
Okay. It's late, right? Aloha kako. O Kenny Fink ko'u inoa, hana ama ka oihana olakino. My name is Kenny Fink, and I work at the Department of Health. Because of the Department of Health's responsibility and history with Kalaupapa, I have been given the privilege of welcoming you here today. I have a couple notes, if that's okay. So Kalaupapa is a sacred place. I recognize that many people have ohana, cultural, mo'olelo, and other connections to the place and people regarding Kalaupapa. You are all very important stakeholders, and we very much appreciate all of you joining us here today. We acknowledge that many people have questions about the future of Kalaupapa, but we believe it's important to begin with a full understanding of the present and how we got here, including current roles and responsibilities of the agencies involved and the complexity and challenges of managing Kalaupapa. To understand the present, it's important to understand the past, and I'll begin with the shared history of the Department of Health and Kalaupapa. The Hawaii legislature passed laws that are on the books that say, the County of Kalawao shall be under the jurisdiction and control of the Department of Health and be governed by the laws and rules relating to the department and the care of and treatment of persons affected with Hansen's disease, except as otherwise provided by law. The Department of Health, subject to the approval of the governor, shall establish and maintain facilities and services as are necessary for the care and treatment of persons with Hansen's disease and persons who are institutionalized for segregation by order of the Department of Health because of Hansen's disease. And notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, the Department of Health shall promote and protect the personal liberty, autonomy, and dignity of all patient residents at Kalaupapa. It has been our honor to care presently and have cared for Kalaupapa patients. And the Department of Health has had this mission for over a century. Oops, thank you. Can you stand there for a second? Okay. So I actually have this book that I found. All right, this is going to blow away. Sorry. Thank you. This is a compilation of reports to the president of the Board of Health. And this includes, each of those annual reports includes a section on Kalaupapa. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to share some passages from 1924. Okay. Frequent and earnest request by numerous patients in the leper settlement who were formerly on the plain oil in conjunction with strychnine, and which was begun here as early as 1903, resulted in acquiescence and action by President Trotter, who made arrangements for a regular supply. This is much appreciated by the older residents and patients, and the two closely related remedies are administered to respective patients simultaneously Mondays and Fridays of each week. It goes into detail about the different treatments that were done there. And it actually was the work of providers in Hawaii who came up with the treatment at that time, which was innovative and novel to help cure Hansen's disease. Okay. Let's see. So this part, one sec. Okay. January 12th, 49 patients were transferred from Kalihi Receiving Station to Kalaupapa. And this is part, there is a nursling hospital. Since its inception in 1908, this most practical and unique of institutions has constantly demonstrated its incalculable benefit. Infants are segregated here as soon as born. And during the period since 1908 to the present time, 247 infants have been mothered and cared for periods from 6 months to a year or more. Considering that infants are immediately removed from their mothers and most of necessity be reared on artificial diet during the most critical period of their existence, the number who have survived makes a favorable showing indeed. Also, it may be noted that the fact that only one of these reported actually acquiring Hansen's disease. And just the last piece. Peninsular segregation on Molokai, enforced of necessity on the patients at Kalaupapa, spells somber isolation. But it also spells fortunate immunity from many dangerous contagious diseases. While diphtheria, scarlet fever, typhoid fever, and many other potentially fatal maladies stalk the free land of outside, none of them have entered here. There are a lot of emotions that may be stirred with this. And my point in reading this is the history that occurred. And however we may feel about it, for the patients and their loved ones, it is important history that we need to preserve. And it was the patients themselves who decided that their history needed to be kept as a legacy so that all would continue to know their experience there. They were the ones who proceeded to advocate for a national park to be able to preserve their legacy. So the Department of Health's role has been throughout this with the intention of caring for the patients. And as we look back, we may disagree with some of the things that did or did not occur, but there was a kuleana to care for those patients for well over a century. And DOH is working hard to be a good steward in preparing with NPS for a smooth transition once our kuleana there of patient care concludes. We anticipate other conversations about the future, and we begin today by gathering with you on Molokai to discuss Kalaupapa today. Again, we recognize you're all extremely interested and impacted by the past and present and future of Kalaupapa. We are grateful for you joining here today. And again, the intent of today is to start the dialogue and to start with understanding the present. So again, mahalo nui for joining us all here today.
Yep, thanks, Dr. Fink. Next, we have, I think we kind of ran through the goals, but just to recap, as Dr. Fink mentioned, really focusing on the current situation, current roles and responsibilities of the agencies. There's a lot of questions about the interagency working group, so really addressing those kind of questions. And then I know there's some confusion we've heard about current access, really wanting to hit those first and foremost. And then, as mentioned, there are a number of issues that may pop up. So what we really want to try to help is clarify which agency or agencies to go to for some of these questions that are particularly future-facing. So that's sort of the flow. And then sort of some ground rules we'd like to ask folks to be aware of. Please be respectful of everyone's mana'o. And if possible, please do not interrupt. We want to keep it a positive kind of situation. Please also be aware of the air you take up. If you are, as they all say, if you tend to speak up a lot, please try to step back. And if you'd like to speak up, or if you're not usually a person who does that, we definitely encourage folks to step up. And then again, it's, as Dr. Fink mentioned, it's a really, really heavy situation and issue. Not everyone may agree, but I think the hope is to try to keep in mind the people and the patients and the place. And if folks really need to talk story, our team, again, we're here to support. So we can go, I've already been asked to be pulled aside after to talk story, so totally open to doing that. The purpose, again, is just so everyone has space to hear and talk story and listen. So that's myself, Mary and Corinne, who are also on our team, open to talk story. And then I think some DOH staff mentioned they could as well, but don't want to, just want to make sure that that's clear. Is that generally okay for folks? Any issues?
Are we going to hear from the other parties, DHHL?
Yep, sorry. I think we want, people want me to speed up. So can we hit the next slide? So yeah, I'll hand it over to Mikiala. She is going to jump and give kind of a big picture overview. Thank you.
E mele inoa no Kalaupapa ina kaulana unega onua. Umaige aloha no Kalawao aina iga nua o waikolu. E o mai o e I ko inoa, he ka papa gona nea ka ikilani. Haina ia mai ana ka puana, e mele he inoa no Kalaupapa e. He mele haku ia na baby girl. E kia kua, e na aumakua na kupuna o kia aina aloha o Molokai, Molokai nui a hina, Molokai aina momona, Molokai no ka heke. Molokai kuila au. E ho'omalu mai, e ho'omalu mai. Molokai is a beautiful, precious child of Hina. One island. every bit of it connected. The same aloha courses through its waterways, comes up through the land, swirls in the air. This mele is just one person's voice, sharing in that one particular moment. It was published in Kalaupapa Ku'oko'a in 1921. One kupuna sharing their experience, and there are 8,000 more like it. Everyone having a unique perspective, a unique experience. But before all the patients came, it was just Molokai. And it was the people, the Aina and the Kanaka. And then came a disease. And then came a cure. And the Aina and the people are still here. I am a testament of the sacrifice, the aloha, the hard work of those very people. And I'm a culmination of the decisions, the actions, the events that have taken place to ensure the survival of my generation, my mo'oku'auhau. My iwi kupuna lie in the soils of Halawa, of Kamalo, of Manowainui, of Ho'olehua, of Pelekunu, and of Kalaupapa. Our kuleana collectively, for many of us here, exceeds the timelines and the boundaries and the policies and the organizations that we find ourselves having to fit all of these feelings and all of this personal history and personal experience to make sense of how we move forward and collaborate to afford the best level of aloha aina we can. And it starts with acknowledging those mo'oku'auhau and the people who were here first, and the people who acknowledged that abundance. The families that lived on the backside of the island, a lot of them are not there anymore. So for those who have the privilege of living in Kalaupapa, we hold that space. We truly do hold that space till we can rebuild and strengthen those relationships. What happened? What happened to us? In the next 2 hours, we're going to throw out a whole bunch of information. And some people like information, and some people like story, and some people, we got to draw picture. We're not really good artists, because I noticed in the slideshow, you get very little pictures. So that's why we put one photo inside, because that's how I think, and that's how I feel. So, in 1848, King Kamehameha III, he addresses two issues. Land tenure introduces what is known as the mahele, and it starts to formalize this agreement that the maka'ainana of Kalaupapa and Kalawao have with those places. And in 1850, establishes the Board of Health to address this growing health issues that Dr. Fink outlined for us. These are these huge challenges already from the kingdom time. And it goes on to Kamehameha Eha, Elima, Lunalilo, Kalakaua, Liliuokalani, every single one of them trying to figure out how they was going to save their people. And Molokai gave up a little bit of itself to make the pu'uhonua of healing and to have just enough. Because if we malama that seed bank, if we malama this little bit, then maybe we get chance for survive. And that was hard for this community. Back then, it still is hard today. This starts to outline sort of, the genesis of all of this really starts back in Kingdom Day, and how the Board of Health was already established back then, and it starts to evolve into, as the governments changed. We kept trying to address the issue at the time with the best amount of information and resource that were available. And we start to separate people from land, because the Board of Health was overwhelmed taking care of the thousands of people that they would find infected with this disease. And so you'll start to see how we pull out Aina management and gave it to the people that we thought would best manage land. When DHHL is formed, there still was not a cure. Those lands were set aside in a trust so that we would never find ourselves in a place where we had nowhere to malama our kupuna who are ma'i. We started to realize we needed to specifically focus on those natural resources in special areas. And those aina started to go towards the management of the Land and Natural Resource Department. Eventually, a cure is found, and things change. And we can read up all the details of that history. The information is out there. But what's important is the context of how these different kuleana started to be teased apart, and how the layers and layers were working together. But that happens as government is evolving. Statehood happens. There's a shift. We're building more programs and trying to really address these very specific issues. And probably most importantly is the transition that we went from establishing a prison, because this was a law that made it illegal to be sick, and treating our people like they were convicts. They're a danger to society. And that's a whole different lens that they held back then, that we hold them in aloha, right? With this honor and admiration for their sacrifice. But back then, their peers treated them very differently. Our patients. Today, we still have them living in our community. And it has been a challenge to maintain the community that they deserve, the lifestyle, the privacy they are entitled to, while still managing everyone else's expectations and needs. And it's not perfect. It is very complicated. And we hope today we can kind of untangle some of that. One thing that I think I get to make a claim that very few other people here can, and that's, I am part of a community because that's my bloodline. My tutus Evie are buried in that ground. I inherited a kuleana to stand in this space. And just like so many before me, while evaluating all of the options and resources available, just as a kupuna invited the Park Service to come and steward their mo'olelo, while working with all these other agencies to malamara aina and the natural resources, the birds and the plants and the ocean, it's a collaboration that has been 40 years in the making. I hold special kuleana, but I don't do it alone. You see, Kalaupapa has always been majority Kanaka Maoli. It's always been a Hawaiian place full of Hawaiians. Today, it is still full of Hawaiians who are still carrying out this mission and holding this kuleana and moving forward. Going to still be Hawaiian. How we do that, it's going to take everyone's contributions and input, and it's this compassion and aloha that I'm personally looking for, but also as an agency, we're all looking for that. If we can just come to these conversations with openness, so that neither of us have to be defensive about anything, and that we can truly focus on the really important things at hand and how we can achieve those goals and not focus on the differences or the failures, because so many things happen. Every legislative season, the rules change. We know that. But there are certain things that are resilient and have held through all of that. And so I hope that this is the first step of many. We've never done this before. And I'm glad that I really commend all of our agencies to be like brave enough. Because most of the time I'm sitting on this side of the table and I get plenty of questions. And with that, we're makoko to do our best to answer them. So if there's some patience in just sort of absorbing this information, it's going to be a lot. Guess what? We can talk story after and keep providing clean and clear information. And that's where the richest conversations are going to be born. Mahalo. Do I have another slide? Oh, no need that. Is this me? You got it.
Maybe. Maybe we can just take a deep breath. That was a lot, mahalo. I'm kind of emotional too, so if we could just take a deep breath. So yeah, thanks, mahalo, Mikiala, for grounding us and at least sharing a little bit of the kuleana you live with and have been stewarding with others that I know some of your other folks you work with are here. So I know you folks all are living that. And as you mentioned, appreciate the agencies coming out. They obviously see the importance. The heads of each are here. They brought staff. So they are trying to figure it out as well. So I appreciate you asking for that compassion, aloha, and openness. I can do that too. I messed up the agenda, Auntie. Super sorry, and I know that's super confusing. So I feel bad about that. That's my bad, so sorry about that. But as mentioned, Auntie, we're gonna hui up with the agencies and just see how to make that in the break. But yeah, so I know Gray's staring at me to hurry up. So next, just kidding. Next, I think we have Baron from the Department of Health, kind of walking through what Mikiala helped to lay out, how they came to Kalaupapa and really their kuleana right now.
Thank you, Brent. And thank you, Mikiala. I don't know how to explain it, but I was touched. Thank you. Very important. I don't know everyone here. Again, I'm Baron Chan. I'm with the Department of Health, Hansen's Disease Branch. And thank you again, everyone, for taking time out of your Saturday to be here with us. So I'm just going to go over the current some of the history of the Department of Health. Mikiala touched on a lot of that, but I'll try to provide a little bit more detail. And then I'll go into the current operations of the Department of Health in Kalaupapa. So this is just a map of Kalawao County, or most people know it as Kalaupapa. And the timeline that you see there, 1865 to today, it shows the involvement of the governmental public health agency in Kalaupapa. It started with King Kamehameha V. When it was a kingdom, it became a republic, then it became a territory, and then it became a state. But throughout that history, whether it was called the Board of Health or the Department of Health, we've been involved since over 100 years. So the Department of Health's role has evolved over time. Originally, we had three main responsibilities. It was to isolate those that were affected by what was called leprosy and is now known as Hansen's disease in Hawaii. We also back in the day, we treated the symptoms. We didn't have a cure for the actual disease, but we did treat their symptoms. And we cared for the patients, not only medically, but we provided whatever a community required. So when we talk about the operations of Kalaupapa, you're talking about a community. So everything from waste management to water supply to electrical systems, everything, even animal control. So what this shows here is that we no longer treat anyone in Kalaupapa for Hansen's disease, and we no longer isolate anyone. We don't force anyone into isolation since medications were found to treat the actual disease. So what we are currently doing is caring for the patients. The state made a commitment to provide for the patients. So what this shows here is our current operations. We have 7 what we call Kalaupapa registry patients. Those are the patients that remain that chose to stay in Kalaupapa in 1969. Unfortunately, we just lost a patient last week. So we had 8, but now we're down to 7. Our annual budget is about $4.3 million. It fluctuates depending on funding issues and all that. Our patients' ages, believe it or not, are 83 to 100. The average age right now is 88. Our oldest patient, many of you are familiar with, he's 100 years old, and he still drives, he still takes walks every day, he rides his exercise bike every day, and he's healthier and stronger than I am, believe it or not. We currently have 33 budgeted positions. 12 are for direct care, so that's the care home. If you're familiar with Kalaupapa, that's the nurses, the paramedical assistants, the direct caregivers. And we have, 21 positions for support. And that's the janitors, the food service, construction and maintenance, those types of positions. Now, we have all those positions, but at any given time, 25 to 40% remain vacant. We've gotten that number down significantly in the past year. We're down to about 30% vacancies. We're higher than 40% a year ago. So we've been working really hard to fill positions. So if we can go back in time, after World War II, in Carville, Louisiana, they actually found a drug. It's an antibiotic. It's in the sulfone drug, and it's called Promin. And the first time that they started using it in Kalaupapa was in 1946. So because of this, in 1949, the Board of Health started implementing changes in their policies on how patients were treated. So in 1969, because of the changes and the patients being treated, that's when they lifted a lot of the language in you'll hear Hawaii Revised Statutes, 326, that's the legislation for Hansen's disease. In 1969, patients were no longer required to live in Kalaupapa. They were allowed to leave. So I was told about half left and half stayed. So when you hear the Kalaupapa registry number, that's the half that decided to stay in Kalaupapa. So because the patients were released in the 1970s, there was a lot of public discussion. They talked about things like, should Kalaupapa go back to Maui? Should it become a state park? Should it become a federal park? I mean, a lot of the discussions that are happening now happened back then. And because of that, the National Park Service did a feasibility study in 1978 to determine if it made sense to become a federal park. And I'm not sure if everyone here knows, but it was at the patient's request that the federal government created the park in Kalaupapa. And so there's a reference on the bottom of the slide about 1977, the state law made amendments, and that was to assure patients that we will continue to provide for our patients. There were laws that stated that the patients could remain in Kalaupapa as long as they choose to, and that we would also provide care for them as long as they're around. So in 1980, Congress passed the federal legislation to create the National Historic Park. And again, that was at the request of the patients. The patients wanted to make sure that their story, their legacy, was shared with future generations, and they felt that the federal government or the National Historic Park could do that best. And they had a lot more resources, just to be honest with you, to maintain the structures down there. In 1984, because of the park starting in Kalaupapa, the National Park Service and the Department of Health entered into a cooperative agreement that is still in place to this day after 2 extensions. And in that cooperative agreement, it talks about what buildings would be maintained by the National Park, which ones would be maintained by the Department of Health, which ones would transition over possibly. But also important, it did delineate the functions that national parks had or would take over time, and what functions the Department of Health would continue. So since 1980, actually, we've been having regular transition meetings with the National Park Service, and that's just to discuss how we can smoothly transition operations over to the national park. So you'll see in the next slide kind of things that transitioned. Oh, I'm sorry, before we get to that, in 1990, we entered into a cooperative agreement with Maui County. And cooperative agreements are normally where for example, one county agrees with another county to support each other in case of fire, in case of law enforcement, and in case of emergency response. In reality, it's been Maui County supporting us. As far as I know, in the last 20, 30 years, they haven't requested any support from us. It's basically one way Maui County has been supporting Kalaupapa. In 1991, the legislature asked the Department of Health to create a transition plan. And in 1991, the Department of Health did hire someone. They put together what I refer to as a pink book. It's pretty comprehensive plan for the transition. I just want to share with you that in that plan, they thought the patients would no longer be there in the early 1990s. So I'm happy to say that we haven't implemented all of that plan, but the plan spells out what functions would transition over, at least in a plan, right? It's just a plan that we try to follow. So again, we've been meeting regularly with the National Park Service about transitioning operations since 1980. And so since 2015, we realized that other state agencies and the Department of Interior, Office of Native Hawaiian Relations should be joining our meetings. For example, Hawaiian Homelands, Land and Natural Resources, and DOT all have a presence down there. Hawaiian Homelands and DLNR because they own the property, most of the property down there. DOT has operations down there. And we brought in Maui County because of the cooperative agreement that we have with them for law enforcement, fire, emergency response. So I mentioned before that in the plan and in the cooperative agreement, there's a lot of information about, how things should transition over or what should be transition over to the national park. So what you see in the blue, you probably can't see all of it, but it's what the Department of Health currently provides. Our focus is on patient care. And all the stuff you see in green, that's all what they've taken over from the Department of Health. Because if you remember, there wasn't a national park prior to 1980. So they've taken on all these responsibilities from us. Things like water, which I'm proud to say that Kalaupapa for years had the best water in the entire state. Thank you. They manage the water system, the waste management system, the electrical system. I mean, there's a lot of stuff they took over from us. There's some shared responsibilities. That's on the bottom in those yellow boxes. It's civil defense, grounds maintenance, vehicle maintenance. And even after the Department of Health leaves Kalaupapa, we will still have responsibilities for environmental remediation. So that's things like we have gas tanks that are underground that we have to remove. There's the municipal and solid waste landfill that we've had conditionally closed, and there's a construction and demolition landfill that we've stopped accepting waste. We just need to finalize the closure. We have other environmental issues that we need to address, like cesspool to septic tank conversions. So these are things that the Department of Health has committed to address, even if we leave Kalaupapa. And beyond our presence there, there's other parts of the Department of Health that would still be involved with Kalaupapa, like water monitoring, air quality, things that all communities have. So although the Hansen's disease branch will not be there physically, there's other parts of the Department of Health that will still send staff over to do water testing. And National Parks is right now working with them. So they've already taken that over. So this last slide, it's just a bunch of, it's a list or a bunch of bubbles that reflect the different types of operational tasks that the interagency working group has been discussing. You don't have to memorize it. The information this slideshow will be put on our website. If you look at this page on the bottom right corner is a QR code, and there are handouts with the same QR code. So if you have a smartphone, you can just take a picture of that, and it'll take you to the website. We haven't posted the PowerPoint slides yet, but we should in the near future after we're done with this presentation. There's also the URL code on the bottom. But this slide just shows you the types of things that we talk about transition. So it's basically because Department of Health wants to make sure that we were good stewards and that we don't just leave everything for national parks to clean up. We want to make sure that we can transition things over smoothly.
Yep, thanks, Baron. And so Nancy Holman from the National Park Service will be next. And we are watching the time. I've been poked by a couple people to make sure there's enough time for the talk story. So just so you folks know, the first two, DOH, NPS, will take the longest. They're having the most kuleana now. And so the other agencies will be a little shorter, or a lot shorter. So we're trying to stick to that agenda that went out to community. So 11:10 we're aiming for. But again, if folks can have grace, if we go a little bit further. But that's keeping an eye.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Holman, and I'm the current superintendent of Kalaupapa National Historical Park. And hopefully I can make up a little time. Obviously, the Park Service as a whole and Kalaupapa National Park is a big topic. I'm not going to get into every detail, but I do invite you. I brought some staff members with me today, Matt Pageant, who is our facilities manager. You met Mikiala Paskaya, our community engagement specialist as well, and we have a whole other team of staff. So if we can't answer your questions today, certainly reach out to us in the future, and we'll try to answer that. Bear with me for a quick moment, though. I want to talk a little bit more broadly about the National Park Service to help anchor us into Kalaupapa National Historical Parks management. So the National Park Service's mission is to preserve special places for the enjoyment, inspiration, and education of current and future visitors. You all did a great job talking about some of these things already today. I like to think of these special sites as collectively holding our important story, all of our important stories. It's why we have over 430 National Park Service sites across the country. Every single one of those sites had an origin story just like Kalaupapa National Historical Park. It started with people just like you that were the closest to the story, that cared the most about the story, and advocated for its protection into the future. So national parks are special places. When Congress designates a national park, they give us a roadmap for what is important to preserve and sometimes how that inspiration, education, and enjoyment could take place. So let's dive into that now. This is a lot of words. This is a small piece of the enabling legislation for our park. And I just want to call out a few things. What's, I think, really interesting and important about Kalaupapa National Historical Park is it's not just about preserving things, not just buildings, not just plants and animals, but also the characteristics of the community, the cultural values of the site. It's very important that Congress called that directly out in the piece of law creating this park. It also calls out specifically that the work of preservation, the work of caring forward that inspiration and education for current and future generations is best done by, again, the people closest to the story, the patients themselves and the Native Hawaiians, all of you. Next slide. So as you're starting to, hopefully you already understood this, but Kalaupapa is a complicated place. The jurisdiction's really complicated. The federal government only owns 22 acres and a couple buildings down there. So Congress actually also had to tell us and give us some special provisions to do the management work of a national park here. So this is another piece of our enabling legislation that calls out how we can expend federal dollars to do the work on non-federal properties. So you can see it gives us a special provision for a type of agreement that we can go into. It gives us provisions on what we can spend federal dollars on. And it also really recognized the potential of what to do with the DHHL property. So until there may be a land exchange in the future, they're telling us we can enter into a lease agreement with DHHL to help manage that land. This is just a piece of the enabling legislation. These are big, lofty goals. Mikiala did a great job of telling the complexity of the story. Lots to preserve, lots of stories to tell. So how do we actually do that work as a National Park Service? Next slide. So we're the relative newcomers on the scene. We arrived in 1980. And thinking about those lofty goals that Congress set out for us, we set to work to put some investments into the infrastructure of the site that would allow us to carry forward the park's primary purpose into the future. So you already heard we installed the water system. We built a museum storage facility. We have over 100,000 items in our archived in our museum collection. They're housed on site. That's really special that this national park can hold their curated items at the place that they came from. We renovated really important community buildings like Pascal Hall. And we started and finished a very long, complicated, as you know, general management plan. This sets the vision for how we do business today, but also the future business as well. And Baron, I think you mentioned the landfill. So when the landfill closed, the Park Service took over the responsibility of the solid waste system. And so we implemented a very robust composting system, recycling system, so that we can keep that waste stream as sustainable as possible going forward into the future. So how do we actually get this work done? Next slide. I like to break down our management activities into about 5 different categories: health, life, and safety, preservation, data collected and monitoring, planning, and visitor use. Let's start with health, life, and safety. Next slide. The National Park Service plays a role in health, life, and safety anywhere we have a protected site. But at Kalaupapa, we take a very much broader and stronger role due to the isolated and remote nature and the jurisdictional overlay. With the Department of Health, we are the operating bodies on the site, so that we are the staff that manage Kalaupapa. Because of that isolated nature, the responsibilities that are sometimes and most often done by cities and counties, like water systems, sewer, electrical grids, roads, are actually conducted by the National Park Service. And again, that provision that Congress gave us is really important to allow us to use federal dollars to maintain those infrastructures to support the primary purpose of the park. Our staff serve the role as a primary emergency response force and enforcement. And somebody, I think, Baron, you had mentioned our relationship to Maui County. So the Park Service has aided Maui County outside of the park boundaries, as well as them aiding us. Next slide, please. Preservation, as you saw, it's right in the mission of the National Park Service. That's the backbone of the work the Park Service does. It preserves stories, it preserves the places and special things that help best tell those stories. It makes space for how those stories are told. So these are just some of the things that are called out in our enabling legislation that we are entrusted to preserve into the future. Next slide. Data collection and monitoring is very, very important. So our management activities are informed by many things: laws and policies of the federal government, scientific findings, as well as traditional knowledge. All are part of how we determine how to go forward. One of the special things about Kalaupapa that is unusual for most national parks, partially because this place has been held mostly in trust intact for the last 40 years, is that we have been collecting a data set that will give the foundation for what is there at Kalaupapa now, how that might be changing due to several different types of environmental indicators, but also how that may change with future use of the site. Our data collection informs not just our management actions, but across Molokai and the Hawaiian Islands and the Pacific Island Network as well. So critical that we've been able to collect that data set for over the last 40 years. Next slide. Planning is such a critical part of how we do business. This is how we articulate our management activities and ensures we're in compliance with federal laws and in some cases state laws. All of our management activities are always going to be bound by our ability to ask for and receive funding, the amount of staff and the type of staff we're able to recruit, and the timelines we're working within. So it's really an important part of how we decide how to do business, articulate it out to you and Congress, as well as recruit and report on those management activities. Next slide. Visitor use is that second half of the Park Service mission, that enjoyment, inspiration, and education side. Starting as early as the 1960s, patients were leading tours of Kalaupapa. There was already general visitor use happening at Kalaupapa before the National Park Service arrived in 1980. We folded those activities under our federal commercial services laws. recognizing that that piece of the puzzle was already in place, it allowed the Park Service to focus on other ways visitor use can take place. Things like service learning activities, education and outreach, and permitting special use of the park site. We also recognize that it's so physically hard to get to Kalaupapa. Some of you have been there, you know how hard it is to get there. It's important for us to be able to share this important story and these important resources with people who will never be there. So bringing the park to the people, we've been spending quite a bit of time and resources working through our digital platforms of our website, our social media platforms, and our Park Service app. So I want to leave you with a couple last thoughts before I turn the mic over. Next slide, please. We have a robust crew of about 43 people that work for the National Park Service at Kalaupapa. 80%, as Mikiela mentioned, are from Molokai and are native Hawaiian. So again, that work, that important preservation work, that important storytelling work is being done by the people closest to the story. I think you mentioned earlier too, Department of Health, we also have a 30% vacancy rate. It's a hard place to recruit. People don't always want to live remotely. They don't always want to be away from their families. It's a very tough place. We spend a lot of time and energy on training and development to ensure our staff have skills that can help do that preservation work. This is the staff that receives a $10 million a year annual appropriation. So this is the appropriation that comes down through the president's budget. Our staff, on top of that annual appropriation, requests and receives about $10 million in project funds. Those are the funds that specifically help us meet these management objectives I've just lightly touched on today. These funds are really important. We are able to utilize through our special authorities to funnel that money through to our preservation partners here on Molokai and in Hawaii, nonprofit entities, universities, as well as other agencies to conduct that work. This is also the same staff that are on site that provide vital and critical services to all the other landholders at Kalaupapa. So again, I'm just touching very quickly on a very big topic, but again, we are here to answer your questions during the talk story time and any time thereafter. Thank you so much.
Yep, mahalo, Nancy. Oh yeah, that's fine.
Can I use this one?
Yep,
Okay.
go ahead. So Chair Chang will jump in.
Wait. Aloha mai kako. My name is Dawn Chang, and I am the chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources. But my grandfather, my great-grandfather, Willie Ho'okano, was sent to Kalaupapa, and he died at Kalaupapa. So I too have a connection to Kalaupapa, not as close as many of you here. But I come here today with my hat as the chairperson of the Board of Land and Natural Resources. I will tell you, from a state agency, this is really kind of unprecedented. You have three directors. Can you see? Oh, not see. Okay. You have three directors here. You have Cully Watson, Kenny, and myself. Is this, maybe I should use the other one? Maybe it's not on? Okay. Okay, let's try again. Okay? Oh, okay. Mahalo, mahalo. Normally I try to talk loud anyway, but thank you very much. So, but we really think that this is very important that we are all here. So for that reason, like I said, we have brought our department heads and our staff. So James Espanola with DLNR is also here. Obviously, I'm not quite all put together here as my papers are flying all over the place. But I wanted to just manage everybody's expectation. My understanding is that today's meeting is really to share with you, through an informational briefing, where we are today, what each one of the different departments, what our kuleana is, and not necessarily here to talk about the future, as I think we are planning on having more talk story sessions with the community. So today is really about what do all of us do right now in Kalaupapa. So with that, I'm going to go through DLNR. I'm going to try to speed this up as well. So our mission is really to protect and preserve natural and cultural resources. The next slide. So I don't know if you can see this, but DLNR's jurisdiction at Kalaupapa, we actually own about I think it's about 1,300 acres. Most of it is, as you can see, the DLNR, we're on the, what would you call that? The west end, east end. Not only am my papers flying around, I'm not very good at direction. So we're at the east end, but most of our land is in forest management. So I'm going to go through the next slide. And out of our lands, we don't have a large presence in Kalaupapa. So we really depend upon our relationship with National Park Service, and we have a cooperative agreement with them. The term is usually 20 years, and the current cooperative agreement will expire in 2029, but it is our intention to continue on this collaborative relationship with NPS. So they actually are the presence in Kalaupapa on behalf of DLNR. They help to manage and operate most of DLNR's lands. We don't have a lease with them. They don't own it. We own it, but they help to manage it. Next slide. So while NPS manages most of our lands, again, DLNR land, DOFA has a larger presence out there. So they manage Pu'ali'i Natural Area Reserve and other forest reserves within Kalaupapa. They oversee public hunting and manage wildlife conservation in designated areas. They maintain jurisdiction over aquatic resources, including nearshore waters and streams, manage land leases and permits. Now, this isn't just DOFA, but all the rest of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Next slide. So shared responsibilities. We work with National Park Service on managing the 1,300 acres. A lot of it, collaboration on fire suppression. We also participate in joint planning, and a lot of it is also with managing feral animals on our parcels. Next slide. Our land division, they're the ones who manage a lot of our lands, and in this case, a lot of it is unencumbered lands. So DLNR Land Division has jurisdiction over lands that we are working with or engaging with Ka'ohana on the Kalaupapa Memorial. Next slide. Again, the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. DOFA is responsible for managing natural resources within Kalaupapa, ecosystem protection, watershed management, endangered species, and public access to state lands. Next slide. We have the Division of Aquatic Resources. They manage and protect Kalaupapa's marine resources and freshwater systems to ensure sustainable use and biodiversity. At this time, the nearshore waters, we do give deference to the patients, and we don't have active regulations down in Kalaupapa, but we anticipate in the future that we will work on developing specific administrative rules that may apply to the marine resources around Kalaupapa. Next slide. State Historic Preservation, another division under DLNR. Their mission is to ensure the protection and preservation of historical and cultural sites in Kalaupapa. So they do work with National Park Service anytime that there is a permit or some kind of any resources that may be impacted, for example, installation of electrical lines or changing buildings, or even the memorial by Ka'ohana. Those are all going through Chapter 6E, and at times it triggers Section 106. But that goes to our State Historic Preservation Division. Next slide. Division of Conservation and Resource Enforcement. Those are our DoCare officers. They do not have a physical presence in Kalaupapa, but they do work with NPS jointly on enforcement issues. So we've greatly appreciated the cooperation we have with NPS on enforcement. But if there are hunting issues, DoCare is also available to assistance as well as fire. Next slide. Oh, I think I'm Powell. I tried to go very quickly because I know we got time. We need more time. Thank you very much.
Yep, appreciate it, Chair Chang. Okay, so we have a stand-in. Nah, kidding. Marvin's gonna jump in for DOT.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Aloha. First of all, thanks for having us here on behalf of the Department of Transportation. It's an honor to be here because Kalaupapa, likewise for myself, is very related to my family, very touching because I think some of you remember Mr. Duarte, or also known as the clown back then, is a close family member of mine. So again, it's very touching to me. And when I started off this job back in 2006, one of our airports was Kalaupapa. So under the Maui Department of Transportation, we cover 6 airports with the same management team, by the way. But anyway, having said that, Kalaupapa was one of our airports. So getting out there was real critical for me to see the needs of that airport and what we could contribute to the community. So when we went out there, I said, oh my goodness, we got a lot of work to do as far as the terminal goes. So as the years went on, we tried to put together some studies. So just wanted to share a little bit. So my presentation will be pretty quick. And again, aloha, Councilwoman Rollins, and nice to see you here today. Also wanted to introduce our Deputy Director, Mr. Kurt Otuguro. He's a great guy to work for. He's fairly new to the Department of Transportation on the airport side, but not new to state, with the state comptroller and also with the Department of Education. So thanks, boss, for being here with me. But anyway, I just wanted to touch a little bit on renovation. So ironically, 2 days ago, we completed a study as it related to lead paint. We did an asbestos test a few years back, which came back negative. We just completed the lead testing, and we did find some lead, but it's not been disturbed. So one of the projects that we got coming up will be to encapsulate that. We got 3 phases coming out. The first phase that we're looking at right now is, do we do a temporary terminal for about 2 weeks to 3 weeks, whether we put up a tent and some portable laboratory units just so that we can expedite the cleanup of the terminal. So that's coming up, but we want to be sure we get input from all the agencies that are represented there, as well as the community there. So we are probably a week or 2 away from getting a better idea on where we are as far as getting the cost for the tents and setting up a temporary terminal. We are working with a few contractors that will help us with the cleanup. And of course, a following phase will be, what do we want to do long term? What kind of repairs we want to do that can probably carry us for years to come. But we will be looking at a long-term plan, and we're working with a few consultants to help us with that. Just to be sure and to be clear, we have no plans to expand that terminal. Neither do we have any plans to lengthen that runway. So rest assured, we don't want to go there. So I just wanted to be sure that we all understood that. Secondly, on second bullet there was the runway. As you know, some of you know, when there's big surf, we get some rocks, we get some waves that come up onto the runway. So one of our strong points that we're trying to push in this coming year is that we want to look at how we can put some money into runway repairs, new asphalt, and how we can mitigate some of that waves that are coming up on the shoreline that create safety concerns. So that is coming up. We also got a project with lighting, upgrading that lighting in the event, again, there's emergency flights that need to come in and out. We want to be able to accommodate that. We're doing a similar project out in Kapulua, West Maui, where County Council helped us make an amendment to the existing agreement that there was no night flights allowed. And we will continue that, but it'll be for emergency purposes only. So we want to put money into that, likewise here in Kalaupapa, so that we can make sure that emergency services are able to operate. And looking back a little bit of the history, I think the terminal was built in 1951. It's almost as old as I am. But anyway, back in 1951, and it's about 1,070 square feet. So, we want to be sure we keep it. We're working with the historic preservation as well, because we know the significance of the terminal itself. So before we do anything, we make sure we're going to get community input. We're working with the Preservation Group and also with Department of Health. And also I want to thank the Department of Health. You know, we've been working with Aaron and his team for quite a while, and the national parks, Hawaiian homelands, and the LNR. So it's been a great run, and trust me, as long as I'm working, I want to be sure Kalaupapa remains Kalaupapa, because it's key for all of us. I think we need to carry that message on, and when we do pass the baton to the next person, we need to make sure that person is on the same wave as we are. So I think that for the most part, that's what we got. We're not anticipating any more additional service at this point to Kalaupapa. I know there was some hiccups along the way, but I think we've slowly been working at that. So I can address that, Deputy Director Tukuro can address that later on. So that's it. See, I told you it was going to be fast. But anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin.
Yes.
And then we have next Chair Watson for Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And yes, I know we're at 11:10. Okay, we're trying. It's a lot of info. Appreciate the agencies being mindful of time as well. But thank you. And I guess I should also, the person advocating for you all, Council Member Keani Rollins Fernandez. So I was poked by the county to make sure to recognize her, and that she's live streaming. So be careful. No. And also mahalo to Akaku for capturing. This is going to be recorded. I don't know if that was clear, and will be put in. Oh, thanks, Valerie. And be put online. So. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm representing Mahina Poi Poi as well. Sorry. All right. So you have your elected officials, at least some of them here. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Aloha, my name is Kali Watson. I'm the director of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. I want to start off saying that Kalaupapa is a very, very special place. And obviously there's a whole bunch of different groups that are wanting to preserve certain things about it, as well as make sure it can sustain itself. With respect to the program, though, when you look at the original passage of the Act in 1920 and 1921, approximately 4,000 acres were set aside for the program. Today we have about 1,247 acres. We have a general lease with the National Park Service. They pay rent for it, and they take care of our portion of the lands. Moving forward, when you think about it, what is our homesteading program about? It's about homestead leases, both residential, pastoral, and agricultural. It's also about a program that allows the issuance of mercantile license for economic development. So whether or not that's something that I think it's something that we should consider. When you talk about preservation and interpretation of Kalaupapa by the Hawaiians, the native Hawaiians, what better way to do it than have a permanent presence of native Hawaiians in the community living in Kalaupapa? Again, that's not a given. That's something that we will have community meetings. We'll talk about it. We'll get input, and then that's a decision that the commission will make. But I think it's something we should talk about, because when you think about what the program is, as well as what a special place that is, even before in 1865, you had an existing Hawaiian community that thrived and survived Kalaupapa. So can we replicate or resurrect that? I don't know. And one of the things that we're doing, especially we have other areas in the state that we are looking to not only preserve, but bring back the people, especially the lineal descendants, that can take on that responsibility. So we have that on Lanai, where lineal descendants are given preference on a homestead award. We're looking at changing our rules to address the beneficiaries in Keanai, as well as Hana, as well as King's Landing. So there's an approach we're looking at with respect to other areas. Now, Kalaupapa, again, it is part of our homesteading program. So should we take that step to maybe have a presence there, a permanent presence of native Hawaiians that are homesteaders that assist in the preservation, interpretation, as well as moving the program forward? I don't know. But we do have plans to update our island Molokai plan as well as a regional Molokai plan. We'll be having meetings as well as site visits at Kalaupapa. We'll be meeting with the community outside of Molokai, not outside of Molokai, but upside, and trying to get input. And then that is going to be occurring fairly immediately in the fall of this year. We'll move forward into the middle of next year. It will be addressing our existing regional and island plan. And with that, we'll get some input, some thoughts, maybe debate, and but also have a recognition that the need of all these different groups that have kind of talked and presented their involvement. We know the Department of Health will be vacating once 7 patients have passed away, and so their presence would be very minimal, if any. And then we have the Department of Transportation, Department of Land and Natural Resources. They have, I believe it's more like over 9,000 acres. Maybe we need to look at the adjustment on how much acreage we have in Kalaupapa, since originally it was specified we were supposed to have 4,000. Again, these are issues that we'll be addressing. We invite your input, and these are going to be tough questions, but I think it's a special place that the Native Hawaiians need to be there. And they need to be a part, I think, of the process. But I'll leave that for our commission to decide. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Watson. And everyone's so excited about the future or looking forward. We got to stick with the current. No, I'm just kidding. But so we're going to break for 5 minutes. I know we're like, woohoo, only 6 over. 11:10, so we'll break to 11:20 so folks can go back to room. It's around the corner that way. Get food, and then we'll regroup for the question Q&A talk story part. If you ended up writing down on the form, that'd be great if you could give it to me or to anyone over here. We're trying to use that as a preview so they can at least start with that. And then we know not everyone likes to speak in front. I'm more introverted, actually. I'd rather write. So if you have those, we'll grab those, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, since I talked too much, so 11:21, 22, 5 minutes. We come back. Okay, thanks. Okay, so at least folks got time to talk story. Again, this is a good opportunity to do that with, again, many of the agency heads who are here. We'll start with like we mentioned, like the interagency and the current access questions first. We good? Can you folks hear me? Is that good? Okay. One is emergency management part of the interagency working group, and i.e. tsunami evacuation, flood, cyber attacks, pandemic, hurricane evacuation? Yep.
Hi, that's a really great question. We jointly manage the emergency response between Department of Health and the National Park Service. Because National Park Service actually has staff that are trained and actively exercise those skills in emergency response, generally the National Park Service takes the lead on that. Last winter, we started an interagency emergency response planning process. The acronym is called SHIRA, S-H-I-R-A. It comes out of USGS system, which we brought all of the different agencies that do emergency response in Hawaii and on Molokai together to talk about how we plan for emergencies and what our response would look like. As you know, it's very, very isolated down there. So if there was an event that were to take place that affected more than Kalaupapa, we know we have to be self-sustainable for a while down there. So depending on the activity, we have different responses for that. But yes, we definitely talk about emergency response a lot.
Oh, look out. You have a question?
Aloha. My name is William Yamakaholo A'a. I'm a leasing and homesteader in Ho'olihua. So I have a question. And the question is, what happens when the last patient leaves? So is this rigmarole is trying to preserve you guys' paycheck or employment? They will continue. I believe that when the last patient leaves, I think everything should come back to the original owner. I'm glad, Mr. Watson, you're here, and you mentioned about the Hawaiian people, okay? So I have a question for you. Why are we here? As a, the department knows that we have an association that represents all the Native Hawaiians on every ahupua'a. And Kalaupapa happens to fall in our ahupua'a. So why weren't we able to meet with the DHHL agency? So please, can we be able to meet with you guys? Sure. And so we can tell you guys what we want to do. We don't need someone else to appoint us or appoint someone or recommend someone because they think that individual is qualified. Okay, so for dear and now, that's an understatement. You cannot say you own the land. Government, all the government don't own nothing. You have to understand that, Hawaiians. We are the legal owners of this land. And the United States, the President of the United States, the Commanding Chief, made that statement. Okay, he did admit that the United States illegally overthrew the Hawaiian government. He made the statement. So he sent his aides to Hawaii to apologize. We don't want apology. We want restitution. That's what we want. So I hope, I'm not here to interrupt, but I think we have a different place as Native Hawaiians to discuss the future of the Hawaiian people. And what you mentioned about, I have family, kupunas that who died in Kalaupapa. Yeah, I'm here to represent them. Us Hawaiians, we have a deep, deep conviction to our kupuna. It's our kuleana, it's our responsibility. I also have responsibility to my posterity. I have 7 children, 35 grandchildren, 21 great-grandchildren. I have a responsibility to them to know the rights as Hawaiian. We are 3/4 Hawaiian. I come from the tribe of Maka'ainana. I born and raised in Waipio Valley, okay? The valley of the kings, where the kings live. And also, the first Native Hawaiian that was born in Waipio Valley. So Waipio Valley is known as the pickle of the Hawaiian nation. You go to all my family, my children, grandchildren, all their home got taro because Haloa is our ancestor. Yeah. So we have, as Hawaiian, as me, I love everyone. I appreciate and respect all your opinion. Yeah. But the way I look at this is like trying to hold on to your job, trying to create job for the government. Yeah. No, I think we have a better method. So, Mr. Watson, we can only discuss this in our own association. That way, all the people of Polehua, the homesteaders, have a voice.
Yeah.
There's no transparency here. All we have is policies that we were never involved in. So, I'm sorry, but I just have to say what I said. For me and my posterity, and for my kupunas that are still there. Their ohana is still there. And I have a responsibility.
There's no need for apologies. You expressed, valid concerns. As I mentioned, we will be having meetings with the beneficiaries as well as people on the wait list and Native Hawaiians in the community separately. So we can hear you independent of all the different organizations. But I do have to say that these other organizations are also very, very important regarding the overall supporting and maintaining and preserving Kalaupapa in the manner it should be. So, this dialogue, it also goes to, with the National Park Service, they get close to 20 million. We're going to need a lot more than that in resolving some of the environmental issues that are existing on the site. So it's an ongoing approach that requires all the different agencies. With respect to trying to preserve jobs, the Department of Health, once the last patient passes away, they are going to vacate. So it's not like they're trying to preserve it. They're just carrying out their obligation under the law. But more importantly, and I have to commend them, they are committed to trying to resolve some of the environmental issues that exist in Kalaupapa. So we're going to work together. But moving forward, with respect to the homesteading program, we look forward to having that dialogue with you as well as your family and other Native Hawaiians. Thank you.
Well, what I gather is that I hate when I hear about money. Hawaiians way back never had money. Money wasn't the issue. Money has no value. It's your heart. So may I share with you the way I look at things in the world. Yeah? Hopefully you can grasp the things that I'm going to say today. Okay? In life, we all belong to something. We also all belong to someplace. And we also belong to someone. But true belonging is not a requirement to change who you are, but definitely requires you to be who you are. So let's be who we are. We are Hawaiians. We are full with love, compassion, respect. Yeah. All my kupunas, I moved here to Molokai from Hawaii. I live here 44 years, almost 60 years I live here. Yeah. So I have come to learn the people here on Molokai, how genuine they are. There are wonderful spirit here. Don't be more transparent to them, to the people here. It's very important. They're loving. Every day I thank Molokai for allowing me to live here and to raise all my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So I just want you to know, that's my feeling about the land in Kalaupapa, how important it is to help our Hawaiian kids to be independent and to be self-sufficient. We have our responsibility. We want to be independent, self-sufficient. We want to be able to take care of our own self and our own family and don't depend on the government. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Mahalo, Uncle. Thank you for that. Watching the time again, so I'm gonna hit a couple questions, try that, and maybe that are slightly related. So one about, we'll stick with the interagency, sorry. A question is, why are there no community advocate or Native Hawaiian representation or DHHL representation on the team? There are only NPS staff that decides what actions, issues need to consult with Native Hawaiians. Why are transition meetings not open to the public? And there's no stakeholders invited. And why is there no public record? Maybe, oh yeah, there.
Brent, let me know if I'm not answering the question. I think the question is why the interagency working group does not have community members or advocates attending the meetings. So if you remember from my presentation, I know it was a little clunky, but the transition meetings. The transition meetings started in 1980 when the national parks came on board and created the national park, or Congress created the national park. And they required that the National Park Service and the Department of Health have regular meetings. They wanted to make sure that we work together. So these meetings, believe it or not, are about transitioning over responsibilities from the Department of Health to the National Park Service. So the one that sticks in my mind is the water system. They took over, was it in early 1980s? So that's a major responsibility. I mean, they've taken on waste management, they've taken on the electrical system, they've taken on, they converted the high flush volume cesspools and converted to septic tanks, and I think that was like in the 20s of millions of dollars. So without them, Kalaupapa wouldn't, as infrastructure-wise, wouldn't be what it is today. There have been previous thoughts about having National Park Service going away, not the Department of Health, but outsiders. And when they saw the price tag, they stopped their inquiry because it's really expensive to run. So the reason why we haven't had stakeholders that are not state agencies invited, because we're talking operations of how we work together or how we should work together. And sometimes, we always we have disagreements like any family, but we smooth it out eventually. I don't know if that answers the question.
And then I'll,
Can you clarify who the outsiders are that you refer to the term?
I'm sorry, when did I say that?
you said the outsiders run the
Outsiders
water.
are interested in taking over the park.
Well, not taking over, but they've said there's been pressure or there's been comments made that why is national parks there? And I read it in the paper. There's certain advocates in the community, I think you know who they are, and they feel that the Native Hawaiians should have control. And when I say Native Hawaiians, of course, you can't generalize and say all Native Hawaiians. It's just whoever's speaking to the paper, right, the newspaper. And I don't want to throw those people under the bus. I wasn't a part of the discussion. I just read it in the newspaper. So, yeah, it costs a lot of money to run it. What I tell people that have no idea what Kalaupapa is, like I have cousins on the mainland, I tell them it's like Alcatraz, but 100 times more expensive. Because if you're familiar with Alcatraz, the prison in the San Francisco Bay Area, they had to ship in their fresh water.
So
No, luckily-
just to reel you in, just because of time, why are the meetings not open to public, and why is there no public record?
So as this slide shows, the focus was on operational tasks. And on this, they list out things that we discussed, like law enforcement, facilities, solid waste management, utilities. So it's not something that, from my experience, that you bring in people from the outside, meaning non-governmental agencies. Sure.
So I think some of the question really comes down to where do decisions get made and who has responsibilities to those decisions. And I think something that's really important to remember is when a state or federal agency has been entrusted with the care of something, the real responsibility is in the decision making, right? It rests within what we would consider in the federal government what's called inherently governmental. So Congress doesn't direct to us sometimes how the work is done, but they do hold us accountable to our decision making. And in a decision making process, federal laws already dictate when and how we go out to the public for public engagement. And so Park Service has not always been good at that over the decades and the century that the National Park Service has been around. Some of those federal laws didn't even come into play until the 1960s and early 1970s. So over the last couple decades, we're getting stronger at how we convey that information out to the public. It's a clear process, although not always well understood and easy to understand. But when we are asking for your opinion or your feedback, we have a mechanism to do that. The decision making has to rest with us. Congress is holding the Park Service accountable for the decision making around Kalaupapa. We can't delegate that to somebody else. We can share the management responsibilities, we can delegate activities and the work, but we cannot delegate the decision making. So when we're working through just literally translating information back and forth, a lot of that is spoken to in the general management plan, this 1991 plan from Department of Health. So those had opportunities for public engagement. There was a lot of public engagement that was done and information that was gathered over that 10-year planning process. We didn't throw that all away. We still have that information. We're using that to inform the plans. There are some things that we don't have to go out for further consultation on because of federal laws. But when we do, we try to broadcast that clearly, and we're going to work on having more opportunities to just get that information out to all of you, since I know that's been confusing.
So I know people want more, but I'm going to just try to get to all the different questions, and then hopefully folks can follow up individually if the answer you get wasn't adequate. So regarding access, when will descendants of Kalaupapa patients be allowed access to enter Kalaupapa again?
If you are a lineal descendant, you already have access. Access is granted in partnership between the National Park Service and Department of Health. Department of Health has the final say on how visitors enter Kalaupapa. If you are a lineal descendant looking to connect with your ancestor, there are two mechanisms to do that to come to Kalaupapa. One is to contact the National Park Service. We'll have you work with our cultural anthropologist, Ka'aulani McGuire, and to plan a site visit for that. Or you can work with Ka'auhana o Kalaupapa. They also provide the same service.
Sorry, Nancy, while you're here, NPS has contracted with tribes to manage indigenous lands. Can NPS do something similar with Native Hawaiians?
Sure, that's a great question. I think the word you might be looking for is compacted, not contracted. That's the federal term in which specific types of management are handed over directly to the indigenous people connected to that site. There are a few parks that do compacting with tribes. One is in Alaska. There are a couple on the mainland. The way in which today's government is thinking about management is really on how we co-steward together. Because other than compacting, again, we cannot delegate decision rights to anybody else, including indigenous communities. But we have lots of pathways to work with indigenous communities on the co-stewardship of the site, both in how we do the work on the ground and also how we tell that story. And I think you'll see as we come forward in the future that we're paving lots of ways to allow for that to happen, but also to extend that invitation in a way that's much more clear, because I don't think it's been clear before.
So this one, I'm not sure who would answer, but 1824 Royal Patent 6405 AP3 to Kaunua Ohua, in parentheses, Konohiki lands for the Ahupua of Kalaupapa. When will you return the Kuleana lands back to surviving heirs? So, yeah.
That's a great question. One that I can't answer since we don't own the land.
I don't have the answer, but I will take the information back and I'll have my department review the royal patent. And then if you have your contact information, we can follow up with you.
The next is about future potential engagement. So when might community engagement happen, preferably with a range of months, so that the community can be kept informed and decisions aren't made without the community having the opportunity to be involved. And similarly, how will DOT, DLNR, NPS, and DOH carry out their mandated consultations with Native Hawaiians after today? Has everyone punted this responsibility to NPS? Might be a big one, but anyone want? Should I go to the next steps side? I know Chair Watson talked about beneficiary consultation tied to the fall and next year, and then rolling into the Molokai Island plan. But other kind of thoughts from the other agencies on future engagement?
Brent? I'm only speaking on behalf of DLNR, but
Oh, I think you need just got the recording.
I'm only speaking on behalf of DLNR, but we do other engagements with other communities, and some of our follow-up is when we're either getting ready for legislation, which may be a very good time, or after legislation, so that we can keep you updated. So either you can help us during legislative session to ask for these specific funds, but that might be an appropriate time for us to get back. And clearly, since this is an interagency collaborative effort, perhaps what we can do is we can go back, debrief after this meeting, all the notes that were taken, and then the agencies can come back and report back to the community, maybe posting it on the DOH's website and getting back to you about when is an appropriate time for us to come back. But I think tying it to legislation might be a really good way for us to keep you informed of some of our next steps.
Can each agency respond to the question?
Okay.
Because that's what the question is asking.
Okay?
So I think we got DHHL, DLNR, anyone from DOH, DOT, or that's it, right? I guess NPS too, if you have. Okay.
With respect to DOH's role, again, throughout the presentations, what we've tried to explain is that our role is really tied to the patients, and we will continue to care for the patients as well as stay on to take care of some of the environmental issues. So our future role in terms of meetings will be, we can always help to facilitate these interagency collaborative community meetings. However, our piece in this is really just to report back on the status of where we're at. Our role is, I believe, I'm not sure who it was. Oh, I know, Kali. Mentioned is that at the end of that route, we will be exiting. So that's pretty much what we would be reporting on, is just what that strategy or process is. So we're very open to trying to help to facilitate this group. We are also involved in Ka'ohana's memorial and working towards making sure that we can get the monies out for that. But other than that, we don't really have a future role in terms of the planning of the future. That's something that is really going to be in the hands of the landowners and NPS.
Anyone from DOT? Sorry.
Hi, good morning. Kurdo Tuguro. Director Sniffen would have been here. He's traveling. But I will assure you that Director cares. That's why we're here. He is all about collaboration. He's all about finding a way to make things happen. It's not good enough to say that's not my responsibility. And so our role as DOT is highways, harbors, and airports. We do have an airport in Kalaupapa. But we look at it a lot more broadly. Our job is to get you there, goods there, and whatever else needs to be there. We're an access vehicle to do that. And so you have the commitment of DOT that we are going to work as a support role for all the agencies here. And I think that's what if there's anything you take away, that's the goodness of this cabinet and working with the county as well. County of Maui, we have a good partnership. And so we are committed to make things happen and work together. If we do this together, a lot of great things can happen.
Aloha kako, Nancy McPherson, DHHL Planning Office. We hear what Uncle Yama folks are saying. We have met with beneficiaries during the general management plan process. We had 2 rounds of beneficiary consultation. We also discussed Kalaupapa when the last update of the Molokai Island plan happened, but that was 2005. So we have encumbered the funds to do the Molokai Island Plan update. The Molokai Regional Plan was just recently updated, but if we need a regional plan for Kalaupapa, then we'll do that too. But the first step is to update the DHHL Molokai Island Plan, and that involves extensive beneficiary consultation. We've also been meeting with beneficiaries that live and work in Kalaupapa. We also had a beneficiary working group to help us figure out better ways to reach out to our beneficiaries. So that is all going to be happening later this fall and into 2025. And that's DHHL's Kuleana. So.
All right, so the last piece of that question that I think might not have been super clear, which is, did all of that consultation responsibility get delegated to the Park Service? The answer is no. In certain circumstances, there's a yes in there, right? And that's where trying to parse apart jurisdiction and legal characterization is really critical. But what I would recommend that if you have something you care about and you want to let us know, you don't have to wait for formal consultation. Come talk to us at any time. Any of these agencies, we're well versed on where the boundaries of our responsibilities begin and end for each agency, and we will direct you to the right agency. I know that's not a great answer. It's probably not what you want to hear, but it's complicated. There's not one agency that manages Kalaupapa. And everybody, hopefully what you learned today is everybody's mission is slightly different. The Park Service is the agency on site doing the most hands-on management of everything outside of patient care. So it's probably a good place to start with us, but we can tell you if that's not our decision to make, or if that process is not an open process because laws dictate that we can move forward without that. But again, if you care about something, and I think you all do or you wouldn't be here, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will record it and we will keep that as we go forward in our planning process and reference it.
Yep. Thanks, Nancy. And on that note, we'll start to wrap up so folks can actually do that. You can go bombard them. No, I'm just kidding. But they're here, right? So definitely a good opportunity to directly talk story, share your any concerns you may not have already. I'd maybe put a name to the face. One more question. What is the status of the $5 million that the legislature appropriated for the construction of the monument for the patients of Kalaupapa?
Oh, I get to answer one. Is that working? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Diana. I work at the Department of Health with Barron and Dr. Fink and Debbie Morikawa. And I'm excited to report that we're making some progress with the $5 million. The money, as many of you know, was given to the Department of Health from the legislature a few years ago with the intention of a memorial being built in Kalaupapa. And Kauhana o Kalaupapa, many who are represented here, has been making great progress on that. We are working currently on a contract so that we can get that money secured and then distributed to Kauhana to build the memorial. So I think we've made a lot of progress in the last, I don't know, what would you say, Val, 4 months? 3-4 months? So things are really moving along. We're waiting on some things from them to continue the contract process. They're waiting on some things from us. But I think things are looking very positive in that area. And I know it's been a long process. The group Kauhana's been working on this for a very long time, and we're really looking forward to seeing the results.
Yeah. So as you come up, so just because we're getting to 12 and we want to be mindful of folks' time, if you have other places to go, obviously don't feel held hostage. We will be synthesizing on the feedback and the questions. Our Kuleans to work with as you heard from Chair Chang, with this current interagency group to figure out answers, and then it sounds like maybe coming back. I just don't want to speak for them, but figure out what's the next steps in engagement. And so again, if you haven't checked the box or put your contact info on that sign-in sheet, that's who we would be following up with. So please do so. Go ahead.
this is for Department of Health. I'd like for you to kind of elaborate on what you mean by having the funds secured. I mean, if the legislature approved it and it's released, I mean, what do you need to secure?
That's a great question. I'm sure everyone is excited to hear me talk about state procurement rules. As you can imagine, distributing money that belongs to the people, that is the people's money, comes with a lot of different requirements and laws that we have to follow. And what happens is, although the legislature gives the money, you only have a certain period of time before you can do what's called encumber the money. And encumber the money means put it in a state account. But they won't let you put it in a state account until you have a contract. And the contract relies on a lot of other things. So it's kind of your classic bureaucratic nightmare. But the good thing is we've been able to continue the appropriation, and we should have that money encumbered and ready to go within the next few months.
So who's in charge of doing the contract?
So that's a joint effort between myself, Barron over here, our attorney generals that work with us, and Ka'ohana and their legal team.
And why hasn't it been done?
Well, this is a unique situation for the Department of Health. We do not do construction. We have never had an appropriation like this one before, so it's taken a long time to figure out a legal way in which we can move forward.
Why don't you find somebody that can do it?
We're doing it.
No, but I mean, how long do we have to wait? You know, I'm old. I want to see this thing done before long.
No, I understand your point, and we're working as hard as we can to make it happen, and I am very confident that we will.
But you're not doing a very good job at it. I'm telling you that now.
Okay.
You know, I mean, hire somebody who can do it, because if you can't do it, get somebody who can.
Well, first of all, I really want to thank Diana because she and her team have worked very hard to move this contract along. It was a very complex situation. We almost lost the money last year because it needed to be encumbered within a year. And then we had to figure out a way to hold on to that money so that we could get a contract in place. The issue with the contract was that again, with the landowners, the location, and Don, I'm sure you know the terms a little bit more specifically than I do, but there were like 5 different criteria that we had to meet in order for us to be able to execute this contract. One was we had to have a lease from DLNR. We also had to have approval from the Secretary of the Interior, I believe it is. And then we also needed to know that there was going to be a management plan for after when the memorial was built. And there were a couple of other things. And trying to get all those things in place and have it in a contract and approved was very challenging. So what Diana and her team did was they were very creative in that they wanted to be able to address the fact that Ka'ohana needed upfront money. And so they crafted a contract that would allow monies to be released in phases. So the first phase that Ka'ohana really needed was the design and planning portion. So that's how the contract is being structured, and I believe Ka'ohana has a copy of the current contract, or next week. So we've been going back and forth with how we were planning on structuring. My apologies for that error. And so we feel we're really close. We've been working with the attorneys that have been consulting with Ka'ohana, and we feel that we have a really good pathway to move forward with this so that the monies that you need for the planning can be released, but all of the agreements that need to be in place for us to be able to use the entire amount can be confirmed or committed by the time that you guys have your plans finalized. So we're on a good path. We apologize. We know it's taken a long time. You know, that's just the way government is, but I do know that our staff has worked really, really hard to try to get this moving so that we can get it to you as fast as possible.
Thank you. So we're gonna officially close. I know folks do want to directly talk stories, so I just want to keep that in mind. And then we're also keeping in mind some of the folks from Oahu may have to fly back, so we're just trying to make sure you have as much face time. And then to close, I think DeGray wanted to honor one of the kupuna here, and I think that'd be a wonderful way to close. So thanks.
I'm going to talk loud because I don't even know how to hold one of these things. But this is Pauline Chow, a resident of Kalaupapa who just recently passed away. And she was a member of our board of Ka'ohana Kalaupapa. And she was a wonderful lady. So that leaves only 4 residents at Kalaupapa. The average age, I'm not quite sure, but the oldest is 100, and I think everybody else is close to 90 or more. So it could be just a few years before this transition plan has to be in place. Yet it sounds like there's still a lot of work, and they've been working on this since 2015, NPS, DOH, and all of this. And what is taking so long? And the fact that we have no community, organization or Ka'ohana on the transition team. And this was something that was talked about at the 2024 legislative session. And it came up that all the committees wanted a topside community organization and Ka'ohana to be on the transition team for a number of reasons. It would be very helpful. It would bring in institutional knowledge because right now, the people making decisions for the future of Kalaupapa are all new leaders with very little understanding of what Kalaupapa is really about. So I think it would be helpful. But one last thing. We talk about, we ask who was selected to give presentations? And DOH said it was based on government organizations at Kalaupapa who were there by statute, by public law or some other statute. Well, Pauline was on our board. Boogie Kahilihiva was our president. He passed away a couple of years ago. This was an organization formed by the patients. The memorial is a project that was formed by, that was conceived by the patients. And by statute, if you look on the DOH website, it says NPS is there by federal statute. Ka'ohana is there by federal statute. So it says right on the top, these are the organizations that have an impact on the future of Kalaupapa, but we're not included today. And it's really a sad situation. And I know that Dawn Chang shared with us at one of the meetings that because of the sensitivity at Kalaupapa, she ranks the needs of the patient residents first, the descendants second, and then the greater community. Yet things aren't playing out that way. We're not on the transition team, and neither is the topside community. And that's something that can happen tomorrow. If Kali Watson, if Dawn, if Barron, if some of these other, all you have to do is say, we can bring them on because they've brought other people on the transition team. And I think it would be very helpful and make people feel a lot more comfortable. And I'm sorry I'm rambling on, but I appreciate that. And I just want you to just think a moment about Pauline and some of the others that have given so much. And the fact that their organization is not here to represent their position going forward, even though they have statute to be there at Kalaupapa, like NPS and DOH and all the others. So thank you very much.
Aloha, I'm Councilmember Kiani Rollins Fernandez. Sorry, Brent, I stole the mic from you. My question that wasn't asked was, when will the next meeting be? Because that's part of the apprehension a lot of our community feels, is that we want to ask so many questions because we don't know when we're gonna get another opportunity to ask our questions. And so if this is like the only meeting we ever have, then that's why we want to have the answers to our questions. So Representative Poi Poi and I just briefly talked about perhaps starting our own working group where we'd love to have representatives from the transition working group or interagency working group attend, and we can do it online, so you don't need to worry about mokulele and fly in, etc., etc. And I'm happy to be the one to host and facilitate and get the link out, and then invite the community to also be able to participate and ask questions. So if I'm seeing nodding heads from the agencies, and so I will take that as a commitment that you will participate in the meetings that we'll be hosting together. So thank you so much again for coming to Molokai. I really appreciate you being here in person with all of us, and your commitment to future participation in our meetings. Mahalo. Here, Brent. Mahalo, Brent. You're doing a fabulous job.
It's like, how can I follow that? Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy your Saturday. But again, this is a great opportunity to talk story with some of the agency heads before some of them have to jump on a plane. But thank you again. There's food in the back. Please whack them. And then thanks to everyone who is live streaming, and as well as the folks on the recording. This will be posted, and then we'll follow up with the synthesis to folks on the list. So thank you, everyone.